What's up, my wizards? It's Dev. Mtg, we like magic, and it's rotation time in the magic microcosm. And every time rotation is looming, I like to do a couple of different videos about it. You know, I like to talk about the cards that I really don't want to leave standard. I like to talk about the cards that I can't wait to leave standard. I want to do that video soon. And my favorite in today's subject matter, I like to talk about the cards that never really lived up to the hype, like the whole time they were in standard. You know, there was a lot of talk about them when they first came out. People have been trying to make them work for 2 years, and it just never really happened. So today, I'm going to give you the top 10 cards that should have been better. Now, before I start the list, a couple of qualifiers real quick. Some addendums, some quid pro quos, all that stuff. When I say that a card never lived up to the hype or that it could have been better, I'm referring specifically to higher levels of play here. You know, I'm not saying that none of these cards ever helped you win an FNM because, hey, some of these cards have helped me win an FNM, and some of them have gone into decks that I've made on the channel that I've felt pretty confident about. But I'm referring to higher levels of play, starting with things like SCG Opens and Invitational Qualifiers, all the way up to Grand Prix and even the Pro Tour. You know, top 8 deck list that we look at as a community to determine what the best decks in the format are. You know, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, all that. These are cards that never really had a chance to shine in that arena. Now, a real quick honorable mention, because I'd feel bad if I left it off the list, Hedron Alignment. I have it in there. I love different win conditions and stuff like that, and Hedron Alignment looked like, when Del was in the format, it might possibly be a thing. When we first saw it, we were like, huh, this looks attainable. And then when Secret Salvage came out, we were like, okay, yeah, let's try and make this deck. But it just never really broke through. It was like a Tier Z deck. You know, just a budget kitchen table deck that won a few people FNMs, because I've heard from those people, but just was never a real card or a real deck anywhere other than the occasional local game store. You know, never once did I see a Hedron Alignment list in a top 8 or top 16 or top 32 even. And that's a little bit sad, because Hedron Alignment looked like, for a time, the most attainable alternate win condition that we'd seen in years. So just sucks that you never really got a chance to be a thing, buddy. I'm gonna miss you. We all are. But enough of my dumb stuff. Let's go ahead and start the actual list here with number 10, Noyan Dar Royal Shaper, fan favorite. Now, Noyan Dar is a perfect example of those qualifiers I mentioned earlier. He has won many an FNM for many a player. I would imagine. I've had some success with this. I put it in decks and put those deck techs on the channel, and you've told me that you've had success with those decks. So, Noyan Dar has never been the worst card or anything. He's just never really gotten into, you know, broken into higher level play, which was always sad. When he was first spoiled, you know, blue-white control players were like, hey, this could be a thing. We're going to be casting instants and sorceries, and we need threats. But also, at the end of the day, Control does not want a 5-mana sorcery speed win condition. They don't want to do that if they possibly can help it. So, and aside from that, blue-white Control has not been, you know, it's a shadow of its former self. You know, ever since, what, 6 years ago? It's hard for me to judge that far back, but what, Return to Ravnica, when we had, like, Sphinx's Revelation, that's the last time, and Supreme Verdict, that's the last time that blue-white Control was really an actual force in a standard environment. And honestly, Noyan Dar wasn't going to help out blue-white. It wasn't going to be the thing that broke blue-white Control or anything. But it is a card that a lot of people have fond feelings for, and I'm sad to see it go, and I'm equally sad that it was never really adopted in the competitive environment. But we got to move it along here. Number 9 is Mirror Pool, and some people might actually be surprised to see this card on the list. I feel like a lot of people have had varying levels of success with this card, locally, at FNM, whatever. But this is another great example of a card that, like, a lot of people swear by, but just was never truly important enough to show up in top 8 lists consistently. Now, the arguments for the card were apparent as soon as we first saw it spoiled. It's like, oh crap, this does a lot of stuff. It can produce mana for you. It can, you know, copy instants and sorceries. It can copy creatures and threats and stuff. Like, it just is super versatile and does all the things. And it's a land, so it's free to play, you know. Just all those things looked really apparent and obvious when we first read the card. But as you try to play with it, I will admit that sometimes its limitations are, you know, all too present immediately. It comes into play tap, that's kind of a bummer. It's just too many little bummers that add up, you know what I mean? It comes into play tap, that's kind of dumb. You know, you have to pump colorless mana into it, that's kind of dumb. Its abilities are super expensive, so you can't really use them with very good or likewise expensive instants and sorceries or creatures and stuff. It's a little bit awkward, it's a little bit expensive, it enters the battlefield tapped, it only produces colorless mana, and it requires colorless mana. There's just too many, like, little dumb things that add up to make Mirror Pool usually not quite worth it. That said, though, isn't this a cool card? It's such a cool card. But it was just never as important as a lot of people thought it was going to be. There was a lot of hype around this card when it came out. Speaking of a lot of hype when it came out, and I'm completely guilty of it when it comes to this card, by the way, I was definitely on the bandwagon for Splendid Reclamation, our number 8. I mean, this thing just legitimately looks like a really stupid combo piece, you know, and there were plenty of ways in this format to dump cards into the graveyard. So it's like, oh, just dump all your lands into the graveyard for the first 3 turns. Turn 4, Splendid Reclamation, profit. It's the next step. But it just, you know, there were better ways to ramp in the format. There were more reliable ways to ramp. It's like, you know, especially nowadays, it's like, oh, I'll dump all my lands in the graveyard. Oh, here, Scavenger Grounds, that away. Like, it's awful. So, Splendid Reclamation just, even with, you know, over a year of, you know, a chance of becoming a thing, this, you know, what looked like an incredibly bomby combo piece that definitely did something. It was meant to do something. It went from that to chaff. My number 7 is our first Planeswalker. We'll hit a couple of those on the way to number 1, but my number 7 is Kiora, Master of the Depths. This thing was supposed to be good. And you know, a lot of people still can't figure out, myself included, why it wasn't quite great. I'm going to take a stab at it here. I think that people wanted the loyalty to be a little bit higher. It doesn't protect itself very well. That's a really big no-no for any Planeswalker. I mean, you can have all the card advantage that you want, fill your graveyard all you want, ramp you all you want, untap your dudes, whatever. It can do all that fun stuff. But if it doesn't protect itself in some way, shape, or form, it's not going to be a very desirable Planeswalker a lot of the time. Not only that, but this is just a classic example of a card that just never really had a home, you know? Kiora definitely looked like possibly something, but it was a trap. It was a trap. Coming up real close behind Kiora is Tamiyo, Field Researcher, another Planeswalker here. This is just another one that's basically same old song and dance as Kiora, you know? She does protect herself a little bit better, you know? She can tap creatures down and freeze them for a couple of turns. That's not terrible, and there is card advantage on her situationally. That was always the big problem with Tamiyo. You know, she doesn't get rid of things forever, and her card draw is situational. Ultimate looks pretty powerful, you know, but you got to get there. And again, she doesn't protect herself quite well enough, even though she does so a little bit more than Kiora. That's what makes her, in my mind, a point, you know, one spot up the list better than Kiora, is because she looked a little bit better, you know? She can protect herself. She can lock creatures down. She can give you pretty easy card advantage depending on the situation. So she had a lot of points in her favor when we first evaluated her, but after over a year of looking at her, it's safe to say that we should learn the same lesson from this as we do from Kiora. She just does not protect herself in a meaningful way, and in this case, she's harder to cast than Kiora was too. An extra color in there is actually a pretty big deal when there just wasn't ever a real Bant deck in this format for the last couple of, since Collected Company. There was, you know, there just hasn't been a real Bant deck, and of course Collected Company didn't want this, so it just never mattered. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, I think the only time that I ever saw like 1 or 2 copies of Tamiyo in anything was Collected Company, and people were saying that like Tamiyo would take the slot of Collected Company when Company rotated. That did not happen for good reason. Tamiyo was just nowhere near the level of sort of legendary Magic card that Coco was. She doesn't do anywhere near the same thing. I don't know why people were ever saying that, other than they both cost 4 mana, and she's a good curve topper, I guess, you know, but just was not enough to carry Bant aggro through the loss of something like Coco. And honestly, after people stopped using her for that, or at least attempting to use her for that, we really didn't use her for too much afterwards. Now, my number 5 is Eldritch Evolution. This is another card that I am very, very guilty of being extremely hype about when it first came out. The card just looks broken. Honestly, being able to cheat up on casting costs is one of the most dirty things in Magic history, or at least historically. That's a very dirty thing to be able to do, and you get to tutor something at the same time, and we were in a format where sacrificing a creature was actually an upside a lot of the time. So I thought Eldritch Evolution had a lot going for it when we first saw it, and a lot of people did. People got hyped about this card for Modern and even Legacy in some cases, but it just was never what we thought it would be. People were even saying that if it was ever going to be important, it would probably be in Modern. And I think that as time goes on, it has more and more of a chance to be important in Modern. Don't get me wrong, but as far as its standard tenure, it just never did jack, never did squat. And that's super sad, because cards like this are traditionally really powerful, and it fooled me. Nobody on the competitive scene ever tried to do anything with this card, or at least if they did, they scrapped their ideas before taking them to real tournaments. Never really saw EE in like, big money lists, or top 8 or top 16 lists. It just was never a thing, and that's super sad because this card looked downright broken to me at first glance. My number 4, and this will probably be the saddest card on the list for some people. My number 4 is the Gitrog Monster. I still submit that the Gitrog Monster is crazy. 5 mana, 6/6, solid body right there, good cost, already not the worst deal ever. You get a keyword ability too, and you get card advantage out of it, and you get extra lands, sort of, This card looked, with the release of every single set, like maybe this is the time for Gitrog Monster. And there are a few cards on this list like that, but almost none excited people as much as the Hypnotoad. And I'm sad that we can't use that nickname anymore. I mean, he can be our commander, I guess, but the card just never really was in Standard. It just never really existed. There were F&M decks, again, that really liked this guy, but as far as higher level play, nobody ever touched the frog from what I saw, and that is the dumbest thing ever, because look how awesome this card is. But we made it to the top 3 here. My number 3 is Kozilek the Great Distortion. Well, for nearly 2 years, this has been known as the lesser of the 3 Eldrazi in this Standard environment. Yeah, we can't play Emrakul anymore. She got banned a while back. But, as far as if you're going to pay 10 mana for something, you definitely just play Ulamog, especially considering Ulamog doesn't require double colorless mana. That's dumb. And Ulamog just ends the game in a couple of swings, even if you get chump blocked. So, Ulamog was always just the better choice, aside from Kozilek, And that's what's truly sad here, because Kozilek is a good Magic card, even though it costs 10 mana. We're talking about a 12 menace that can counter spells and draws you as many as 7 cards. Get you to a full grip when you cast it. It was never as good a reanimation target as most Eldrazi. Was never good as a ramp target compared to, again, things like Ulamog. So there's a concrete reason why Kozilek never saw play, and that's because Ulamog is just a much better card in the competitive environment, and in really almost any environment. Ulamog is just a stronger card. And that's sad, because you'd think there'd want to be some kind of balance between the Titans, and, I mean, if you just compare this to either, Sister Emrakul or Brother Ulamog, it is definitely the weakest of the 3, and it's not really hard to tell that, but I still feel like the card could have had a shot, and it never did, and that kind of makes me sad, even though it's a world-eating Titan. But my number 2, we're getting up there now, we're almost done. Number 2 is Arlinn Kord. This is one of the cards on the list whose lack of use I understand the least. First of all, I don't think 4 mana is too much to pay for a Planeswalker. If you're comparing this to a 4 mana card like Kiora, it's obviously much better. It can buff your dudes, it can, create creatures, and it can zap creatures. A Planeswalker, by the way, that can make tokens and zap creatures. Those are usually really important. She's capable of both of them, and her ultimate's not bad either. You can just win you the game. And, I just used the example. If you compare her to a 4 mana Planeswalker like Kiora, she's obviously the better choice. But if you compare her to a Planeswalker like Chandra Torch of Defiance or Gideon Ally Zendikar, they're obviously the much better choices. So it makes a little bit of sense that this never saw play, but it seems like it's just half an inch from making the cut in a lot of decks. Just Arlinn looks incredibly attractive as just a Magic card on a basic level, so it's kind of amazing that she never did anything. She had a chance too. But that said, there were also points in the format where she can't be important, Turn 4 wins from Cat Combo, Aetherworks Marvel, obviously those things lock a Planeswalker like this out of the format. Really fast aggro like Ramunap Red probably lock something like this out of the format. We just, if you'll notice the trend in the Planeswalkers on the list and some things like Gitrog Monster, Noyan Dar, mid-range just has not really had its day in a couple of years. That's probably the big lesson to take from this list. These awesome-looking Planeswalkers at 4 mana never really did anything, and, these huge, awesome creatures like Gitrog Monster never did anything. It's because mid-range decks just weren't really in vogue or even really viable for the last couple of years here. And again, huge shame, because cards like Arlinn Kord are dope, and they definitely deserve a chance to see some play. But we got to wrap this thing up. Here's number 1, drum roll. It's enough time for a drum roll. Number 1, Gisela the Broken Blade. I think by a lot. Now, in my mind at least, it's pretty easy to diagnose why Gisela was never really, quote, important at higher levels. And that's because she has the same casting cost as this idiot right here, who we've already seen in this video, but I don't, just get him off the screen. I'm sick of looking at Gideon. After 2 years of looking at that exact Gideon, I'm about done with it, especially considering that I do feel like in some ways he kept my girl Gisela out of the format. Gisela's so cool. And there are other things that maybe made her not so great. You know, 3 toughness is another thing that I feel like pushed this card away from playability. But in a world without Gideon, I still feel like it would have been worth playing Gisela. I mean, look at her, man. You know, 4 mana, 4 power flyers, good, 3 extremely relevant keyword abilities. And you can meld her up. Like, there's just so many cool and very powerful things about this card. Like, if Gisela had been printed in 1997, we would have all lost our minds. Like, there would have been riots if you printed a card like this, you know, before the turn of the century. Because this thing is extremely OP, looking at least, to old school Magic players. But I'm tapped out for now. That's all I've got for this list. But before you leave, help us determine in the comment section what our next video is going to be. Here's the ideas here. Either next time we're going to do the top 10 cards that get better with rotation, the cards that will stay in standard and get better because a bunch of other cards are rotating out that maybe keep them down. We're either going to do that video or we're going to do the top 10 cards that we can't wait to rotate. A hate video essentially about cards that we hate and are overexposed and we've seen too much, or they're just a little OP in this format and have been the whole time they're in standard. Just the cards that we can't wait to just get out of here. Now if you're done with that, remember to like the video if you like the video, sub if you're new, because spoilers are coming really, really soon, like in the next week or 2, I think. Official spoilers are going to start, so stick around, sub to the channel, make sure you hit the bell for the notifications so you get all those videos. You can also check us out on Twitter at SBMTGDev, or if you're really cool, you can throw us a buck on Patreon. That'd be awesome of you, at patreon.com/SBMTG. And if you want, you can check out TCG Player. They're good enough to sponsor my videos. They think that I'm cool. I hope you think they're cool. We can all just love each other. So go check that out, and I'll see you cats later. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.